This is it's an interesting topic, and I want to begin by calling attention to what scholarship in and around early Christianity looks like. So, what I mean by this partly is you don't have people with the same vested interest studying subjects like World War II that you do with people studying early Christianity for obvious reasons, right? When you're studying early Christianity, you're not just talking about historical events, you're also talking about the beginning of a religion. And
Hmm.
oftentimes, the people studying that beginning of the religion belong to that religion.
Hmm.
So there's a difference between, I think there's a categorical difference between history and religion and how both of these disciplines approach the past. That's kind of where my big objection lies. I'm not really like a lot of times I hear when I listen people when I listen to especially like atheist versus theist debate the resurrection. Most of the time, what I hear is the atheist trying to engage with the theist about details about the gospel account. And for the most part, I think that's a fruitless endeavor,
Hmm.
right? Our primary sources about the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus are the gospel accounts,
Hmm.
right? And the gospel accounts present a very particular picture of that. My critique lies to me, if you want to accept the resurrection of Jesus as a matter of faith, that's cool. Mhm.
Hmm.
I don't I don't have a horse in that race anymore. You do you, right? But to say that the resurrection of Jesus is a historical event or that it can be described or supported by historical evidence, I think is a misclassification of terms. It could be
Okay.
it could be supported by religious evidence for
Hmm.
sure. It could be supported by like eyewitness testimony. I don't have any problem with that, right? I think
So, but
yeah,
isn't everything is like okay? So, like a big thing is like, obviously, first of all, I don't subscribe to the resurrection of Jesus. I'm just pushing hard
yeah,
against this because I want to get some good answers because I find it interesting. But so there's obviously the eyewitness testimony that we
mhm,
have. There's the empty tomb reports, and there's
mhm,
11 times eyewitnesses testified to seeing a resurrected Jesus in the Gospels.
right.
Um, so as far as like history goes, what else do we have? I mean, we know the Gospels were written 30 to 60 years after the event, 65 years after the
Mhm.
event. But in regards to the historical method at the time, doesn't Jesus fit some of the best, like, I mean, using it in today's standards, sure, it's crap. But in regards to the time, like, it's as good as anything else we have at that time, isn't it? Like, it's like there's not much else that we can.
Right. Um, Speaking to that point a little bit, and this is something that's easily forgotten by people having these conversations. A history professor of mine used to like to say that people of the ancient world inhabited a different universe than we do. Because all the basic assumptions that we have about the world and how the world operates are not shared.
Okay.
So they lived in a world where angels and demons and spirits were as tangible to them as, I'm about to go watch RuPaul's Drag Race after this, as RuPaul's Drag Race is for me,
Hmm.
right? It was a daily aspect of their life. Their life revolved around, typically speaking, revolved around and centered around religious practices that were fundamental to them as people. That's not for us. Now, to answer your question, like I don't see a reason arguing with, again, going back to the debates that I've heard, like the disciples believed that Jesus was raised from the dead. Like I don't think you can argue that.
Mm.
I'm willing to accept them at their word. That's what they said. That's what they believed. But that doesn't mean I have to accept the ontological position that resurrection is possible and that the supernatural realm exists and that as a result God exists. Right? There's a lot of
Yeah.
leaps there. So historically, here are my problems with that. I'll lay them out and you tell me what you think.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, the people that make these claims, these sorts of claims are not made anywhere else in the historical scholarship. Like you'll never find, I can't say never, you might. You'd be hard pressed to find a legitimate academic historian who studies something like World War II, making the argument that some sort of supernatural event occurred.
Mm.
They don't do
But
it. Yeah.
I'll let you finish, but we don't have any, because we don't have any stories of supernatural events happening, right? God died in Auschwitz is the old saying. Really?
There's
in World War II?
tons. Yeah.
Really?
Well, so I'll give you some examples. And this is why I think the criteria that the people who argue for the resurrection, one of the problems is that you make that argument. And if you're consistent with that argument, you have to accept a whole host of things.
Of like Sathra Sai Baba, for example,
right?
From India.
I'll use World War II. So every October, I like to teach classes. I call it Spooktober. It's a cheesy high school thing, right? And so one of the classes that I taught it was a book that was written about Nazis and the occult. And the Nazis were really big into occult sciences.
Okay.
And there are plenty of very high-ranking Nazi officials, specifically Goebbels. Is it Joseph Goebbels? I can't remember Goebbels' last name. As well as some other people in Hitler. Hitler himself, I don't think we have reason to believe it. I'm getting bogged down in the history. But there were some people, very high up Nazi officials, who believed in the occult power and who believed that they were harnessing occult power to reinforce the Nazi army. And they would do this by finding occult artifacts and, casting like magic spells and building castles that align with certain like geometrical features of the stars. And then they tried to harness that power to use it against the Allied forces. And they believe that. And people like Goebbels would write in his journal about the things that happened to him and that he experienced. There's a reason why he was pursuing it, because he believed that some of these things had happened to him.
I do know that there are other, because the big thing obviously is if you accept the claims that Jesus resurrected from the dead based on the evidence, not based on faith, like let's remove faith, then unfortunately you'd have to do the same for so many things.
Yes.
Right? Like, are there any people even in the Middle East that have like similar like miracles given to them? Like, do you know any of any? I know that, for example, Muhammad, it said that he's of Islam. He said he split the moon. That he spoke to the angel Gabriel, and these are all not eyewitness testimonies, but they're all written down as historical.
Right.
Are there any other faiths of the time, of Jesus' time, anywhere around the world that had eyewitness testimonies making claims of divine intervention or supernatural things, that if we were to accept Jesus on historical merits, we'd have to accept these other claims as well?
Right. And so this gets into the second big methodological objection that I raised, is that no historian would move from, again, no academic historian.
You keep slipping back into philosophy mode. Yeah. Your philosophy brain kicks in. You're like, you can't say never.
You'd be hard pressed to find a historian that would accept that historical evidence and historical documentation somehow leads to ontology. And the reason why, to make another reductio that you mentioned, is because if we accept that standard for Christianity, unless we're making a case of special pleading or special bargaining, right, you have to accept that standard for everything else.